So starting out with case 12 in the casebook, let me now pull it up to share. So remember yesterday talking through 18.1 and 18.2, we are going to go through a scenario in a second where I figured out what's the difference between those two parts of the rule. Remember, we had 18.2a and the first sentence of 18.2b. I said it seems like they're the same thing, but I did figure out what is the difference. So we'll go over that in a second. First, this guy. So we've got these two boats coming up, and this is probably a situation that the exact thing we won't really see in high school sailing, but the concept was very important. So we've got these two boats have been coming from a mark that's somewhere off on the right side of our screen, and there's current. It's light wind, and the current is coming from the top of the page down to the bottom of the page. Same with the wind. So here's somebody coming in. This boat, the white boat, they went high. They stayed up current so that they'd be able to swoop back down towards the mark when they came to it. And we can kind of see as we're looking at position 1, position 2, this boat is definitely moving much faster than the we'll call it the gray boat, I guess. So this guy had not done that, so he was swept downwind a little bit as the current pushing him. So he's sailing back upwind to get to this mark. They're both coming around it. We can see that at position 1 is when this boat gets into the zone. At position 2, they're coming in. He's fully in the zone. This boat has not gotten there yet. Position 3, getting closer. Now our white boat has entered the zone. Then at position 4, there's obviously somebody's going to have to make room for somebody else. The question is who? So this first paragraph here is just describing what I explained there. So the white boat is coming in, and it looks like they are anticipating that they have mark room. So they are definitely planning their course to just swoop right in here inside of the gray boat. So as things come up, the leeward boat, the gray boat, is telling him, no, don't go in there. You don't have room. Was not given room there. Right after position 4. So we saw that very last spot. They're both within a half boat length or so of the mark, and it's very obvious both of them are going for that one spot. So as the white boat started heading up to go around the mark, I don't know why, I don't know what O is supposed to stand for. We'll just keep calling it the gray boat. Right as this white boat made it obvious she was going in there, the gray boat did try to head down and give her room, but they hit each other. So the white boat protested under Rule 11, windward leeward. Again, they were saying mark room didn't apply there because she was saying that the white boat did not have mark room, and just said windward leeward. I was the leeward boat, but then she was disqualified under 18.2b. So what's that one? Let's go back to, I know one of these tabs is the rule I pulled up, not definition. Oops, I hit the button for stop share. All right, well, let me find it. I'll keep talking, but let me find it without accidentally pushing buttons. I know somewhere I have the rule that I pulled up. Here it is. All right, now screen share coming back up right there. So if we look at 18.2b, one of the things we talked about before. So this is the part of the rule that they used. If boats are overlapped when the first of them reaches the zone, outside boat shall thereafter give the inside boat mark room. So if the gray boat was disqualified for this rule, that would imply that the white boat was considered to be overlapped. But in our head, and like it would make sense that the white boat was the inside boat here. But if we think back to the rule when it says if they're overlapped, is either of them overlapped? And I had to go back and really carefully read the definition of overlap and realized that I, and probably a lot of us, have been slightly misunderstanding the rule. So, or sorry, the definition of overlap. So let's find, whoops, again, hitting that button to stop screen share. Right here, I think there we go. So let's look through this definition: clear stern and clear head, semicolon, overlap. So we're actually defining what this is, what clear stern and clear head is. So let's read through this. One boat is clear stern of another when her hull and equipment in normal position are behind a line of beam from the aftermost point of the other boat's hull and equipment in normal position. So what that is saying is, remember yesterday I drew up on the whiteboard, you have that line behind going off at right angles to the back of the boat, or from the back of our rudder, since that's the farthest back point of our FJs or 420s. And we said if boats are crossing that line, they're overlapped. But if we read right here, the definition doesn't say that. It's like a very small difference, but it turns out to be very important for our understanding. Instead of the way I explained it yesterday, which was if boats are crossing that, two boats, the bow of one boat crosses the line off the stern of another boat, they're overlapped. Instead, it says if the bow of one boat is not crossing that line, the one boat is clear head and the other is clear astern. So they define it as if that condition is met, then we have a clear head boat and a clear astern. If that condition is not met, if there is no, here, let's go to an image, make sure everybody's able to envision that exactly. Oh, I should erase my stuff day to day. That would make sense, wouldn't it? There we go. All right, so we've got these two boats. The definition is saying if this line ear to ear is not crossed by the blue boat, then the blue boat is clear stern, the yellow boat is clear head. It does not say anywhere, if we pull it back up and look at it again, it does not say if these two boats if this line is crossed, then they are overlapped, right? It just says if that condition is not met, then they are not, or then this sentence, we'll just read straight off. They overlap when neither is clear astern, right? So if that line is not crossed, then they are clear head, clear astern. But if neither can be defined as clear astern, then we just say they are overlapped. And again, on the surface, it doesn't seem like that's a super important distinction. But if we go back to our case here that we're looking at, under our previous understanding of overlap, we would have drawn a line right across the stern of this white boat and said, well, the gray boat never crosses it. Or we might have drawn a line across the gray boat and the white boat never crosses it. And so you might have trouble finding out, is there overlap? Like, obviously there must be, like, this boat is obviously the inside boat coming to this mark. This boat is obviously the outside boat. But the rules always refer to boats that are overlapped. And under our previous definition, or hopefully some of you had understood it correctly, but I definitely had not. Under my previous definition, I would not have found either of them to be overlapped. And so I was very confused as to where it was written that this was the inside boat. But now that we understand exactly how we define overlap, we find that instead of looking for boats to cross the line, we look for them, we look for, are they clear head and clear stern? And we can't say, by that definition we just read, we cannot find that either one of them is clear head or clear stern, which means that by default they are overlapped. So I thought that was very interesting to realize that I had been misinterpreting this definition. So hopefully that helps us with our understanding there. This again, this is not a specific situation we'll ever see, but it just gives us that little clarification of what is overlap. Overlap is actually the default. boats are overlapped unless we can find that one of them is clear ahead and the other is clear astern. All right, so that is that's all we need from that one. So remember, this guy is, as he comes to the zone, we find that these two are overlapped simply because we can't say that either one is clear ahead or clear astern. So they are overlapped, and now we can see that the white boat is the inside boat compared to the gray boat. So the gray boat will owe the white boat room. And so again, remember with the one part of that, what was it? Part F, I believe, or E. No, neither one of those. But the part where we say if we, yeah, because it wouldn't be written in the rule. Never mind. But the interpretation that we read through yesterday, where if this boat was moving a little quicker, maybe if we say there is no current, so both boats are basically moving the same speed, and technically this gray boat does owe mark room to the white boat, but if he gets here before the white boat, to the extent that he can just sail right by before the white boat even gets there, then he's free to do so. He doesn't have to sit around and wait for the white boat to get there, so we can give it mark room. So that's another important clarification. But for that, just make sure that we are understanding overlap correctly. All right, so that is that bit. I believe this was case 12. Let's back up to case 2. We've got something else to look at. We will slowly scroll down so we don't see the answer. All right, so I don't know. I would have expected world sailing to be universal in their wind direction, but we have the wind coming from the bottom of the page for some reason. So this is the case where I figured out what's the difference between 18.2a and 18.2b for sentence. Remember yesterday I said I don't know what the difference is. So turns out 18.2b is basically 90% of all cases. 18.2a is kind of like, it's like the backup if it doesn't cover it. This is one case that shows us when a situation when 18.2b might not apply. So we have two boats here, and remember we talked about overlap. We can find that boat A is clear ahead of boat B, because if we draw that line right across at right angles to the transom, the back of the boat, boat B is behind that line, right? If boat A were to, when boat A jibes here, now neither one is clear ahead or clear astern, because both of them, the boat B is ahead of this line, and for boat A, and boat A is ahead of this line for boat B. So now neither one is clear ahead, clear astern. They are overlapped by our definition. But for this position 1, boat A is clear ahead, boat B is clear astern. Also, boat B has just entered the zone. So right here, position 1, we take our snapshot. Now, if we look at 18.2b, first sentence, what does it say? If boats are overlapped when the first of them reaches the zone, but they're not overlapped and the first of them has reached the zone. So here's where part B does not apply. So suddenly we do find ourselves back to part A. In part A, we get to there at position 2, right? When boat A jibes, so that, let me go back to the picture. Boat A jibes, so now neither one is clear ahead or clear astern. They are overlapped. So now this guy is in the zone. He's clearly the inside boat, and boat A will owe him mark room under part A, not under part B. So that's the difference. And again, when do we see this happen? Not usually. Usually boats are not going down until they're level with the mark and then jibing over. It is probably at least 90% of the time that you're sailing and racing, it will be 18.2b that is applying this one, because most of the time we're all heading toward the zone together, straight downwind, and so there is overlap when we reach the zone. But for those couple of cases That's why there is the difference. So that is another like, oh, cool, interesting, okay. Because I definitely would not have puzzled it out without this case to see. So again, we don't have to like walk through this whole thing, but that is just showing us the difference. So under 18.2a, boat B is the inside boat at the mark, and he is owed mark room. So in this particular case, when boat A ran into the back of him, it was boat A's fault. They were disqualified. All right, cool. So 2 cases down. Very big brain time going on there. So yeah, for while we're scrolling down to case 9 that we're about to look at as well, for the people that came in halfway through that previous thing we're talking about with overlap, we realized that the definition of overlap is not actually defined except as a default sense. Instead, we look for, is a boat clear ahead and is a boat clear astern? And we find that when we draw that line at right angles to the stern of a boat or to the back of the rudder of a boat, like I did yesterday, if one boat is behind the other's line, then we say they're clear astern, rather than the way I defined it yesterday of saying if a boat crosses that line, they are overlapped. Instead, we look for, can we define it as clear ahead, clear astern? If we can't do that, then we default to being overlapped. And that's how we can get to that position we were describing in really both cases. We pointed it out. So little change in possibly your understanding of the rule if you had misinterpreted it before, or if I had misinterpreted it for you, as we have found. All right, so this one is we see it being relevant when we're doing team racing. We won't see this very often in fleet racing that we're going around a mark to starboard, but worth looking at it. So when Rule 18 applies, does this apply? And it turns out that we could probably have come up with this ourselves. This isn't a very complicated one. If we look at the rule, when does 18 apply? Here's our very first exception: between boats on opposite tacks and on beat to windward, or our second exception: between boats on opposite tacks when the proper course at the mark for one but not both of them is to tack. Going back to our page here, this guy obviously has to tack to go around the mark. This guy does not. So Rule 18 does not apply. There's no mark room of any sort going on here, which means that the port tack boat, is not entitled to mark room. If she would have been, kind of looks like this guy would have been the inside boat anyway, but they are perfectly in their rights to keep going as long as they want, even if it means that this guy is forced to tack away or forced to duck. It could be, especially in team racing, this guy might be doing this on purpose to force him. But it is, as our team racers should know, it's perfectly legal. Mark room does not apply in this situation because the boats are on opposite tacks and one of them has to tack to go around the mark.
That's my favorite mark trap.
Somebody's playing Virtual Regatta. That was a very well-timed penalty, I have to say. All right, so we got that one. Cool. So 3 scenarios down. I forget which number I'm looking for next. Next number we're looking for, 21. Let's scroll all the way down to case 21. All right, whoops. Let's go back up and make sure we don't show the answer. Here we go. All right. Is this just a question? It is, yeah, cool. All right, so when Rule 18 requires a right-of-way boat to give mark room to an inside boat that overlaps her, what is the maximum amount of space that she must give? And what is the minimum amount of space that she must give? So we touched on this a little bit yesterday, right? And we said, basically, there is no objective answer. It just depends on conditions. So this kind of discusses it in a little more depth. So in the situation, definition mark room that we looked through yesterday states that the inside boat is entitled to room for 4 maneuvers. 1, they have room to leave the mark on the required side. So if it's a single leeward mark, we're rounding it to port, or however the sailing instructions say, usually turning left, like NASCAR. But if we have mark room, we are allowed to leave that mark on our left side. We have room to sail to the mark if the inside boat's proper course is to sail close to the mark. So again, the terminology gets a little confusing, but it is talking sometimes some marks we're not rounding. Maybe it's a finish mark that we need to get to, but we're not spinning around it and going back upwind. Room to round the mark as necessary to sail the course. So again, kind of the same deal there. And room to tack if certain conditions are met. I think we talked through some of this yesterday. The inside boat is overlapped to windward of the outside boat. So if it's if that's a leeward mark, that boats are coming around and they're about to go back upwind, and the tack is part of the rounding necessary to sail the course. So if it's a windward mark that we're coming to on the port ley line, right? We've got two boats sailing from the left to the right, going upwind, and they're both going to have to tack around the mark. So mark room will apply because two boats have to tack. It would not apply if only one had to tack, but since both of them will have to tack, it will apply. And because we have to tack to around the mark, that inside boat will have mark room, even though technically, as we'll see in like a couple minutes when we talk about 18.3, technically when you tack in the zone, you will lose mark room. The boat on the outside does need to give us room to make that tack because they know it's going to happen. And the inside boat would be fetching the mark after a tack. So if we remember, we looked up the definition of fetching yesterday. I think we did. If not, we could go back and look at it real quick. Basically, boat is fetching a mark when she can pass to windward of it and leave it on the port side without changing tack. So if you're on the starboard ley line, you can sail straight to the mark, go around it. If you're above the starboard ley line, you can still sail straight to the mark, go around it. Both of those cases, you'd be fetching the mark. Cool. So once we are allowed to do all of this under definition of mark room. So move on. Definitions. Room and mark room do not include reference to a maximum or minimum amount of space. No rule implies that the right-of-way outside boat has to give a maximum or minimum amount of space. This is the only thing written in the rules that is required, promptly in a seaman-like way. So this is another thing that I may have misinterpreted at some point in the last year in an explanation to somebody. I feel like I remember saying this. If you are jibing around, say a leeward mark, right? Maybe you're the port tack. You're on port, and the other boat's starboard, so they have right of way technically, but you still have mark room. We sometimes get in cases where we're so close to the other boats, they're crowding us in so much that when we jibe, we have to like catch our boom or it'll hit them. And the question has been, is that legal for the other boat to push us that close? Technically, it would not be, right? A seaman-like way does not include catching your boom or catching your main sheet and holding it from going all the way out, right? If we're going straight downwind, then our boom is supposed to be all the way out to the side. So if we don't have room to jibe and let the boom go all the way out to the side, we might not have been given the mark room that we should have been. They're also entitled to space to avoid touching the mark, right? So we should have enough room to get around the mark without hitting the boat on the outside of us or hitting the mark. So that's going to be more than the width of our boat, obviously, right? If our boat is, what's the FJ? I feel like I measured it recently. It's like, I don't remember. It's a little over 5 feet wide. So that's going to mean probably we're looking at like 6 feet of space because we need a little bit, at minimum, we need a few inches between for the mark and a few inches for the other boat, right? And probably a foot or more. But we are entitled to that room to not hit anything. So here's where it does have to get subjective, and we can't just put a measurement in because we sail in all sorts of different conditions, all sorts of different types of waves or flat water, all sorts of different types of wind, and sometimes there's current. So just kind of reading through this. If we are, it's very light air, we don't need a lot of space, right? We just need the hull and properly trimmed sails. So again, if we're going straight downwind coming into this mark, our sails are, the proper trim would be to be all the way out to the side. So that's going to be a lot more space than if our sails were in the center of the boat, right? If we might have bigger boats, we might have choppy waves. And so, if the mark is being tossed around, if we are being tossed around, it would not be reasonable to expect the inside boat to be, pinched up 6 inches away from that buoy, because that buoy is going to be moving around in at least a 2-foot radius, right? So that leaves us with negative space when that buoy moves around. So same deal, we're not dealing with spinnakers for high school, so we don't have to worry about that sentence. But again, if it's heavy air, especially in 420s, we might be planing coming into the mark. And so it's in 420s, we might not take as much space to turn around the mark. But if it's very wavy, or if there is a lot of current, I think the example we used yesterday was, if there's current pushing you up the course, you're going to need a lot more time turning around the bottom of the mark before you head upwind, right? We're going to be going kind of sideways for a little bit and then head upwind to make sure that we don't drift upwards into the mark. So a lot of different, these are all kind of coming up with different specific examples, but we can afford to generalize a little bit. And it kind of comes down to the experience. When we sail in different conditions, we get used to, what kind of space we need to round in different conditions. Obviously, as the inside boat, we are trying to round in as little space as possible anyway. So we're not looking to take extra space. And so it's to our benefit to find out what's the minimum we need. So just figuring out how much we do need, and taking what is owed to us. But if we're not the right-of-way boat, we can't take more than the minimum. So if we know the minimum, then we also know when we have not been given the minimum. All right, so that is that case. Cool. Another one down. Next up, we have 25. Scrolling down. And I think after that one, there's one more. This one and one more, and then we're going to move on to 18.3 and 18.4. They will not take as long to go through as 0.1 and 0.2. All right, so one here, let's see. We've got two, basically an FJ. We've got windward boat, looks like inside of the mark, and windward, and outside of the mark and leeward. So that's what, it wasn't talking about white in that last case. I'm just realizing when I was like, what is O for? That's typically what they do. So again, I don't know why we couldn't just have a standard wind from the top, but we have the wind coming from about 45 degrees, the top left corner of my screen. And it is a windward leeward, I guess it's probably to just fit it in space, but I'll keep complaining about it. So normal windward leeward course, this is the leeward mark, and windward mark is away upwind. So we've got position 1, position 2, position 3. This is basically, what we were talking about just before. So at this point, when the outside boat is beginning to head up, they're doing it slowly. We can see that there's no sudden turn. It's a nice smooth track. So they are following rule 16. They're giving time to avoid. But this boat, despite clearly having moved past the mark, and it looks like they're from the angle of the wind, they're still going downwind even. They haven't even started turning back up. This outside boat, the leeward boat, is turning up slowly. There's contact here. Sounded like up there, or somewhere down here, the explanation is that this boat said he had, he wasn't able to trim his main sheet in as fast because he had an end boom sheeting system, which if you've seen a laser, how the main sheet goes out to the end of the boom, that was his. We don't have to go into all that, but he did not avoid, but he said it was because he wasn't able to avoid in time because his equipment was different. So the the answer comes back to there was plenty of time. Even if you weren't able to, we'll give you the fact that maybe you can't trim your main in as quickly as this boat. But there's nothing in the rules that says that you only need to turn up wind as fast as you can trim your main in, right? I think the Steve Cockrell guy, the Boat Whisperer guy, talked about that for like rounding marks in general. He's like, you don't have to slowly turn up as your main comes in. It can luff for a second or two if it needs to. But especially when you're the giveaway boat, there's no rule that protects you while you're doing that. So the fact that he did not avoid made that it's his foul there. He's passed the mark. So under no matter what conditions we're looking at, he has been given room to round that mark in the manner that he needs to in a seaman-like way. And so Rule 18 turns off at that point, and now we're just back to windward leeward. And this is the leeward boat. This is the windward boat. He did not give way, despite being given time to. All right, so there's that one. And one last one. I think we're done on this page. I pulled it up somewhere else so I don't have to scroll down 30 cases. This guy. All right. So this time, looks like the wind's coming from the bottom of the page. So we've got all these boats. Looks like A, B, C, and D are all kind of in a row. E is behind them. Now, if we think through tactics, E is being smart. E is not being the outside boat. They're being the behind boat. And we'll see exactly why that's smart. Because as they get down to the mark, obviously B owes room to A, C owes room to B, D owes room to C. But once we get down here, because there's so many boats right here, D is actually outside of the mark, or out of the zone, sorry. So E actually gets to the zone first before D does, which means that they are now the inside boat, right? Remember, there is no, right here there's a clear astern, but by the time they get to this situation, there is no clear astern or clear ahead. So again, by default, the boats are considered overlapped, and they are now overlapped. At least one of them is in the zone. So E gets mark room from D. I think the main question of this case was, even though, in this situation, D is obviously ahead of E, and it seems kind of, it's kind of unfortunate for D that E just gets to hop ahead of them at the mark. And the case is basically saying tough luck. So in our case, when we talk tactics, yes, that's why, one of the reasons, there's multiple reasons why we say be the behind boat. And I think in this situation here, E might even have mark room on C. Let's see if they tell us. Just D. So C still had it, because they still would have been probably clear ahead when they got to the zone, and that way, so E would have had to stay behind C because C was clear ahead and got into the zone. So you'd have, what is that, 18.2b. Now that we know all these numbers, the second sentence of it, right? This guy right here. So boat C still had, which page we're on? This page. Boat C was ahead of E, but D lost it. So that's one of the reasons we don't want to be on the outside. So nice way to illustrate it. All right, now let's roll into talking about 18.3. So let's bring back that. Let me cut some of these pages now that I'm done with some of them. We're done with definitions. We'll leave that up just in case. Done with this guy. I think we still needed. Done with this guy. Whoops. Let me pause this for a second. Sorry. Got too many tabs open here. All right. So bringing up our rules, let's read through Rule 18.3. If I can share the screen with you again. Where's my button? Here we go. Boom. All right. If a boat tacking in the zone, if a boat in the zone of a mark to be left to port passes head to wind from port to starboard tack and is then fetching the mark. So remember, we defined fetching just means that they can go straight to it. They're going around it on the windward side, and they don't have to tack or sail above close hauled after that. She shall not cause a boat that has been on starboard tack since entering the zone to sail above close hauled to avoid contact. So imagine if we had a boat. Let's go back to the whiteboard real quick. If we're coming up to our mark here, we got one guy coming in from the port ley line, one guy coming in from starboard. This guy comes right in, he tacks here. But because we tack, we're a little slower, right? So this blue boat that's just been going in a straight line is a little faster, and boom, suddenly he's got to avoid, he's got to head up. This may or may not be a foul, depending on what head up meant. So let's look through the whole part of that rule. She shall not cause a boat that's been on starboard tack since entering the zone to sail above close hauled to avoid contact. And she shall give mark room if that boat becomes overlapped inside her. When this applies between boats, then rule 18.2 turns off, and we just look at this. So let's break down what that means. Back to the whiteboard. So let me make a little more space for us. That's a little better. So this guy, remember we said fetching could mean a lot of things. It could mean we're exactly on the ley line, we're sailing close hauled right to the mark, or it could mean we're above the ley line and we're sailing we're sailing straight to it, but that means we're sailing below close haul. So if this blue boat is exactly on the ley line, and we as the yellow boat come in and tack on the ley line, and this guy catches up to us and has to head up, if he was already sailing close hauled, then heading up at all is going to make him be above close hauled, right? So in that case, we can see the whole thing. There we go. In that case, this guy, the yellow boat, has broken 18.3. He made this guy head up. He made the blue boat head up above close haul. If this guy was a little higher, right? He was farther up. He'd gone past his ley line, and he's sailing straight to the mark. But it means he's sailing lower than close haul. In this situation, this guy comes in. He tacks right in front, and this guy does. The blue boat has to head up to avoid, but he has to head up like maybe just too close hauled, or maybe he's still a little bit below close hauled as he heads up to go around. In that case, the yellow boat has not broken 18.3, and he's perfectly fine. The other part of that last bit of that sentence we read is if the boat behind that caught up, if it becomes overlapped to leeward, then this boat still gets mark room, right? So in the normal part of the rule, if you catch up and make that inside overlap inside the zone, you don't get mark room, right? We talked about our snapshot. We care about what happens at that snapshot. But because we've tacked in the zone, then that snapshot goes away and it doesn't matter anymore. Now we have to pay attention to what is happening as we get closer, right? So if this guy, as he's coming in here, maybe it is this situation, right, where they were both a little high before, so there is room for him to duck underneath, and now he's still going to be able to make it to the mark. Under normal rules, we'd say, well, no, tough luck, slow up and go behind me. I was the clear head boat. I'm the yellow boat, I'm the clear head boat. But because the yellow boat tacked in the zone, it means this guy, if he got under here, this yellow boat has to give him mark room now. So when we totally lost my train of thought, forgot what I was going to say. So when we come in here, that's what I was going to say. We still care about the zone in the sense that this only applies if we were both in the zone, right? So if we have our 3-boat length circle, we go up and we tack right here. We are now on starboard tack. We finished our tack. We are no longer tacking. Then this blue boat enters the zone. That's fine because we are not tacking, right? We are now the boat that's clear ahead and is in the zone. Now this boat enters the zone, and then he's definitely the boat that's behind. So if that happens, we're also fine. It's only if this boat is in the zone and we are also in the zone, the blue boat and the yellow boat are both in the zone, and this yellow boat comes in tacks, now we have to look at rule 18.3. Anybody have questions on that before we move into, I think I had one scenario we can look at 18.3 with. Whoops. Peter's been waiting for goodness knows how long. Hopefully not more than a couple minutes. All right, so that is the basic 18.3. Let's pull up. I've got one scenario for that. Let me find it before I screen share, actually. It is this guy, I believe, right? Number 75. Let's get to 75. I do have to scroll a little bit. Oh, it's 95. It's right here. Perfect. All right, let's screen share this guy and case 95. So again, remember with the case book, they're not, or they're numbered in order of when they happened, right? So they're often all out of order compared to each other. That's why we're scrolling around. We had like 2 and then 26 and everything. So it's just finding what's relevant. All right. And for some reason, they decided to put the boat names in. So we get to deal with Jaga and Freebird instead of like L1 and W2 or whatever. So we've got 2 boats overlapped on port tack. Scroll down so we can see here. So Freebird and Jaga. Looks like Jaga is in the zone here. We go to position 2. Jaga is still in the zone, still on port tack. Freebird has tacked on to starboard. They're heading in here. And then at right here, we could kind of say that when the tack happens is position 2.5. And so if we look at Freebird, position 2.5 is like right here, right? So they're definitely in the zone. So both boats are in the zone and Jaga is tacking, which means that now we look at rule 18.3. So when we get to position 3, they've come up and remember the rule. Freebird has got an inside overlap on Jaga, which means that Jaga does owe Freebird mark room because of that rule, because they tacked in the zone when both boats were in the zone. So Freebird is owed room to round the mark as needed. In this scenario, Jaga luffs up. I don't remember if they explained why. They just did, because this is a real life scenario that happened for some reason. And we know that boats spin around the centerboard, so the stern goes down when you luff up. Freebird said, oh, that's a bad deal. I'm going to have to head down to not hit their stern that's swinging toward me. When they headed down, they hit the mark. They protested, and Jaga was disqualified under Rule 18.3. So that one's pretty straightforward. I think they go on to say that there was an appeal, but they said no. But basically everything we've just kind of walked through. All right, so if your 2 boats are in the zone and one of them tacks, they have to watch out because they may end up owing mark room to the other boat. The bit about whether they're close hauled or not is also important to understand, right? If instead of being able to go overlapped like this, if Jaga had tacked like right here into where Freebird is in part 3, then Freebird obviously would have been coming into that spot. They would have had to head up and likely would have had to head above close haul. So that would again have resulted in Jaga breaking Rule 18.3 in another part of the rule. So that one is, it's a lot smaller than 18.2, a bit easier to understand. So hopefully this helped us kind of see what was going on there. Let's go ahead and move on to 18.4 right here, jibing. When an inside overlapped right-of-way boat must jibe at a mark to sail a proper course, until she jibes, she shall sail no farther from the mark than needed to sail that course. So remember, our definition of proper course is what we would sail in the absence of other boats to finish the course as fast as possible. We can even, if we want, pull up our description and double check. And yes, a course a boat would sail to finish as soon as possible in the absence of the other boats referred to in the rule using the term. So proper course, so we may, it's saying inside overlapped right-of-way boat. So an example would be, we've got 2 boats coming in on starboard tack. So the boat that's on the inside is the leeward boat. So even if there was no mark room, they would still have right-of-way. So they can take they can take some room, they can do that wide and tight rounding. But it's saying don't do wider than you would have done if that other boat wasn't there, right? You're not allowed to like push them farther out. However, we have this one final sentence of the rule that's very relevant to us. Rule 18.4 does not apply at a gate mark. So we think about that, and also about the fact that the Appendix D, the team race appendix, takes away Rule 18.4. It turns out that, is it like zoomed in? Is it zoomed in? I'm seeing it okay on my screen. Let me know if something's wrong. So it turns out that in high school sailing, we actually don't have Rule 18.4 relevant to us very often. So I think in the last year, the only two places that I can think of that Rule 18.4 would even have been a thing for us is at Northeast, where they never have a gate, and at Baltimore, where they did the big box going around, right? So those are the only two cases in like the whole past year that 18.4 has been relevant. But for those cases, let's make sure we do understand it. So I've got one more case to look through now that we're down to our last couple minutes. So it should be finished up in perfect timing here. Oh, wait, how far did I go? We're looking for 75. For some reason, Control F was not working for me in here. So let's go through, we're almost there. 78, 76, is this it? 75, all right, cool. So we have two boats sailing downwind to a leeward mark to be left to port. So this is very relevant to us. This is often what we see. So we got this starboard boat coming in here, and they are on starboard. So they're either starboard to the port boat, or even if this guy jibes, they're still the leeward boat. So they, no matter what, no matter what, this starboard boat has right of way, even if the mark goes away. So he's allowed to go out and do his wide and tight rounding. But the port boat, let's see, so he starts going out to do his wide and tight, and this guy is not avoiding, he keeps coming down. And I think they said his rationale was that this guy took more room than was necessary. But in this case, we found that the proper course for the starboard boat would have been to sail out and do that wide and tight rounding, because we know that doing a wide and tight is going to get us up on that, it's going to get us further up on that windward leg than if we do the tight and wide and end up way over here and then have to sail a little more. So they had not broken their proper course. They were following their proper course. Their proper course might have even to go in even farther out. Who knows? But they had not broken Rule 18.4 by this. If we were to imagine kind of the other possibility where the starboard boat does make the port boat jibe and then keep sailing, and the port boat is just stuck here. Now he's on starboard, but is the windward boat, and they both keep going that way, and that would very obviously not be proper course for this gray hash boat, right? So in that case, they would have found that this guy had this starboard boat had broken Rule 18.4, but not for this, where we have the right of way. So we're allowed to take it to make the rounding that we want to make.